Hey guys, Loman02. Going to be reviewing a game today. It's actually just a recorded match. I just went through, and the match does fortunately work. So I was playing against player Michelle Wong in the 100-card singleton format, and played a series of very interesting games between two of what I consider probably top-tier decks in the format. She's on blue-white or Esper. I think it's blue-white control. I don't think it has an Esper Pie mix. I think Esper is a tiny bit better, but it's a very light splash of black. And we're playing 4-color blood. This is a game number two. So it's a boarded match. The first game, unfortunately, we were about 20 cards deep, drew 3 lands, and lost horrifically. Just got snowballed by card advantage, and lost quite handily. And that's one of the things I suppose that can happen in a deck that runs, I believe, 35 lands in it, with a lot of mana dorks. So opening keep is a mull, if I remember correctly. Yeah, we mull that. One lander. Boil's cool. See a land on top, leave it. Play out the Sand Steep Citadel, and our plan is to play Voice of Resurgence on turn 2. She suspends an Ancestral Visions. We draw Stomping Ground. Take the damage because I don't know what I want to fetch yet with Windswept Heath based on my draw. I don't think she's going to be damaging me, so the 2 damage is not likely to be that relevant. She has one of the best draws in Swords of Plowshares. Actually, the best against that card in her deck. The second best would have been Path to Exile, but I do have a Forest in the deck, and I would have ramped myself. Although at this point, I'm on a very mana-heavy draw. We see she has also Snapcaster, which is a very strong bridge play. Here, she opts to target Swords of Plowshares, only target. She makes some small error here. She actually destroys my elves to save the 1 damage. I don't think is that relevant, allowing us to pump the Servant of the Conduit. I do this here because early threats like Servant of the Conduit can force her to use mass removal against my much smaller threats. Um, and I don't plan on playing into it. I just turn on the Raging Ravine here. She taps because I know now she has Repulse in hand, and I kind of figured then as well. Ancestral Visions comes out the stack. We see a Wasteland, which is a big bummer because it means our man land is dead. And we're at the point in game where we kind of have to jam cards, so we have to jam and hope. She doesn't counter this, which means she either intends on dealing with it with the Celestial Colonnade or she doesn't have counter magic. The other thing that made sense for me the one questionable play we made here is the Dramoka's command on the Servant. I wanted to save it for the reason I just said, plus it also paired off well against Fairy Conclave, which you'll see later on in the game is actually relevant. So we cast a Liliana here, expecting it to get countered. I believe it gets Power Synced or Condescended or something like that. Yep, and we can't tap. We just allow it to our mana to tap here, and pass it back. So we draw a Huntmaster for the turn. We figure we'll attack in. And one cool thing, always play your spells. Well, not always, but in this context, play your spells second main. We're feigning removal here. She doesn't want to fire up her Celestial Colonnade and lose a crucial land. Plus, she wants to crack the Myriad landscape. So we allow her to do that. We don't play into it this turn. We're going to wait. We're at a point in the game where she's hit critical mass of lands. She has infinitely more cards than we do. So we need to wait for her to make a mistake or cast a spell like this and then play our spells into it at that point. And I don't really want to play into Wrath, so I'm playing cards like Elsbeth, Knight Errant here because I want to force her hand. If she doesn't have the counter magic, which she didn't counter the Garrick, leads me to kind of believe she has conditional counter magic or doesn't have counters that will get this. It ends up being that she has an Absorb, so she gets that. She either drew it or had it and just didn't want to counter Garrick because she felt she could kill it at some point with the Celestial Colonnade, which she ends up going for here. So she kills the Garrick off. We draw another man land, which is not horrendous. But the first man land we fire up is going to get Wastelanded, which is a huge beating to have an opponent who's smart enough to know not to just Wasteland automatically. You generally want to save that card and force me to use my mana. We get Hydroblasted here, so we see one of the cards she drew. Obviously a board card. I don't. It's an interesting one in my opinion. I don't know if it's right or not. We run a few red spells, but not a ton. It is the lightest splash in the deck. It's possibly still right. Wrath of God happens here, and we're like, okay, well, we lose our tokens that were free, and we lose 1 card. And that's kind of what I mean is like we've exchanged. She's drawn all these cards. She's 10 cards more than us right now, and we've gotten to a point in the game where, the game may have broke here. We may have to try to restart this, guys. It looks like the game broke, unfortunately. I'm gonna go on a quick pause and try to restart this. It looks like the replay just failed because I definitely put out that Verdant Catacombs right there. I don't think it was a Verdant Catacombs. So quick pause. We'll be back. Get back to this point, and hope we'll be able to finish. All right, guys, we're back. The recording is working again. We drew for this turn a Verdant Catacombs. Ended up playing out the Eternal Witness and getting back our Elsbeth. I believe search for a Bayou here and pass it back. Opponent in Erstwhile has a Dust Bowl, which is problematic, but it's going to take her a lot of time and resources to utilize it effectively. She Dust Bowls one of our lands, and Elizabeth actually sticks, which allows us to put a soldier on the board. You see right now she's at 72 cards in deck. We're at 82, so she's 10 cards up on us. Attacks the Elizabeth, which roughly goes to 5. We draw Bolt, which is a great pull here. She has to hit the Elizabeth with the Celestial Colonnade, losing her Gideon, allowing us to attack her. So we essentially have her on a 2-turn clock, but she doesn't know it yet. Kills one of our lands, our man lands notably, which is not good for us. Fires up the Colonnade, kills Elizabeth. I believe on her end step or after she's passed, we hit her with the Bolt. Draw a Kolaghan's Command, which is also a great draw. Now, part of me wants to get her to tap out her mana and block the Eternal Witness, so that I can get the Eternal Witness back. I don't have great creature cards that I can cast in the same turn in my graveyard right now, so what I'm hoping for is to get a land and have her block the Eternal Witness, bolt her, get Eternal Witness back, get Lightning Bolt, kill her. The ideal land draw would obviously be a fetch land, but as you'll see here, if it keeps on going, nope, we're gonna have anything happen. I think I considered it for a long time there to actually use it on her end step, but she had just used Peak and knew I had it and had anticipated before. And I think I was right to wait there, because I believe it does end up getting countered. So she goes ahead and fires up the Celestial Colonnade. So we're gonna do 1 damage to her. She has, of note, 2 blue mana, but she'll have to go down to 1 life to counter at this point in time. She's on 2 cards, though, so we're at card parity, regardless of the fact that she's at 68 cards to my 79. So that's something to say about card advantage. Card advantage is not just about how many cards you've seen in your deck, per se. It's about how many have been relevant. That's why I think these sort of decks tend to put Azorious decks in a bad position, because I've only seen, a fraction of the cards she has. However, the ones that I have cast have been more relevant and have used her resources up. We resolve a Deathrite Shaman. She's her draw step and then concedes it here. So yeah, we played on the Garrick first because if she had a hard counter, I wanted her to hard counter that. And I knew the Deathrite was actually the more relevant of the 2 cards, but I figured Garrick would be enough to incite some sort of reaction. Although I think technically, I guess if all you have is Remand, I guess you got to do it. But you can fire up the Colonnade and kill the Garrick, regardless if I pump it to 4 or if I make a Beast. Evidently, it's still a little risky for her because if I make 2 beasts, then she's in a place where she has to block it, or she has to attack it and block, which means she requires, what is that, 12 mana or something like that. She could actually double activate Celestial Colonnade from here. It would involve her fetching a land though, or having another one in hand. So we end up beating her with a draw that only 78 cards left in our deck, with 64 in her deck. So I think that's a testament to just the power of 4CBlood, because every card you draw, even some of your lands, as you saw, they were pretty relevant there, were pretty strong. Her low on clock, I think we feel pretty favored this one. The last one was probably the best game. This is not. Well, there's one interesting part to this game, I think. She plays on a tap land turn 1. She's on the play, which we obviously would rather be on the play with this deck, because once she gets to 2 mana, the options for counter spells increase exponentially. So this hand was an interesting keep, but what really rationalized the most is the Bitter Blossom right here. This card destroys control. Like, if they don't have a Disenchant or an O-Ring effect in a very timely manner, they are going to lose to it. Or Vindicate. But I know she's not playing black, so Vindicate's not a thing in her deck. Bitter Blossom is just, if you don't have an answer within like 4 or 5 turns, you're going to lose to it on control. It is a very threatening card. The other cool thing about it versus control players, and you'll see this in the game, is it forces them to dig for the right answer for it, which when they're digging, generally dig is sorcery speed. Some of it's not, but it forces them to try to find the answer for it, and it allows you to resolve other threats during the same time frame. So we'll have the Godless Shrine tap. We do have a Dork, but it only comes out on turn 2. It's one of our worst Dorks, the Servant of the Conduit. So she draws an Edit Card Waste, so we know she has blue mana available now. We end up drawing Birds of Paradise, if I'm not mistaken. We end up just casting out the Servant of the Conduit because I kind of want her to counter it. I'm like, you can counter this. It's okay. I'm trying to set the stage for landing the Bitter Blossom, as opposed to like the Doran or like the Garruk. They're all fine threats, but I think Bitter Blossom in Garruk, Bitter Blossom is a beating. If you've never seen that done, it's quite hilarious. But I don't really care about getting the big mana stuff. I want to just get the Bitter Blossom now. That's my biggest goal in this game. So my thinking is, if she counters this, great. If she does not, then at some point I expect she'll Wrath, and when she Wraths, I can resolve the Bitter Blossom. She goes ahead and miscalculates this Servant of the Conduit, which I'm like, meh, okay. It gets countered, cool. And we obviously do not pay 2. We do not have Simian Spirit Guide and Elvish Spirit Guide in our hand. And apologies, Moto's working a little bit slow. You could have noted I could have played out the Birds of Paradise and played around like Force Spike or like Sensor or something like that, but I kind of want also, if she doesn't counter it, I kind of want something that can swing as well. So we see a Tectonic Edge. Well, the joke's on her. We don't have lands. Um, I don't believe we draw any lands this turn either. I believe we draw Deathrite Shaman. Yeah. And what we end up doing here, because we figure she has something up, is we end up just going for the Deathrite and the Birds of Paradise and passing it back. We're trying to bait the Wrath out of her because if she has another white mana or blue mana, any sort of mana, and has a Wrath in hand, I think it's a very strong play to Wrath here because I think it's likely that she will think that she's screwing us on mana. Even though really with this hand we don't need a lot of it. Obviously, our Elspeth and our Garrick are better cards in a vacuum than Bitter Blossom, but in this matchup, I think the best card in our hand is easily Bitter Blossom. It's just very hard to deal with. So this turn, I believe we do draw a Wooded Foothills. No, I'm sorry. The Manland, Whispering Wildwood, or whatever that card is. If Moto will get to it. And we end up trying to cast down our Elspeth once it gets there. Come on, Moto. Well, guys, it may have frozen again. Maybe I have to go on a quick break and come back to it. It appears that Moto is struggling to load my draw step up. One moment. All right, guys, we're back. Yeah, there's the Whispering Wildwood. We use Deathrite and Birds to cast down Elspeth, figuring it's going to get countered. The way it gets countered, I believe, is Snapcaster Mage into Miscalc, which is fine because what I want to do here is force her hand. I think if she sees that we have the ability to cast some pretty bombastic spells like Elspeth, Knight Errant, she'll try to go for a Wrath of some sort, and she does here. So she goes for Supreme Verdict. We play Possum with our land. There's no point in exposing our door in the Siege Tower or Garrick. Or I'm sorry, not being able to cast those spells, I guess what I'm getting after. So she does exactly what we're talking about. She goes into a flurry of cantrips to try to find answers to Bitter Blossom because the card is a Haymaker punch. And I guess in some ways it's kind of like boxing. I mean, she's out of time anyways, but Bitter Blossom, is like snapping someone with a cross, right across their jab, and that first hit like gets them solidly, and it just avalanches into overwhelming advantage. And that's kind of what you saw here, I think, is Bitter Blossom, after we baited the Wrath out of the control player and forced them to tap out, really forcing them either to have, really just Force of Will is the only card they could have had that would have stopped that because they don't have an island that can daze or use for daze. And even then, I think we had Stirring Wildwood up. But it forces them to go to a cycle of looking for the right answer for that card and allows you to resolve more cards. So I think one of the biggest things when you're playing against the blue-white style deck, and that's kind of why I brought this matchup. It's not because I wanted to show a match. I won against Michelle. It's kind of a match because this is an overwhelming victory right here once we resolve the Bitter Blossom. It's very tough for her to beat that card. She'd have to find the O-ring, and then now she's got a Planeswalker to deal with after searching for it, etc., etc. So what you're trying to do though is a lot of it's dealing with hidden information. So their cards can only answer certain things. And they generally tend to be very good at answering certain things, but they're not as flexible as your cards are if you're playing a more mid-range or aggressive deck like 4-Color Blood. Because all of your cards just do something, which is what you saw in the match prior. I mean, like, we only needed, half the cards she had, not really half, but like maybe like 2/3 of the cards she drew from her deck to beat her with. Because they do a little more to impact the actual game state. Control is a fun deck. Like, I don't get me wrong, I love the deck a lot. I just think it's in a tough place, and it has to get a little lucky to beat these style of decks. I tend to think because its overall card power tends to be actually a little lower. I think, and there's certain cards you choose, and like some of the ones like I won't hinder or like I guess talk too much to the card selection of Michelle's deck. I'm not a fan of Repulse. I think that's a bad card. I think it's a fine card, but like I don't think it is the best of cards for this style of deck. I think Into the World is great. I don't normally like using it on tokens, but a draw step's a draw step. Well, either way. And that was in the previous game. But as you can see, I mean, it's just it's tough for Control because I mean, if they ever land like one threat you just cannot deal with, like they're gonna win with it. Like throw on the last troll, for instance. I mean, yeah, sure, Wrath of God gets him, but I mean, Supreme Verdict, if I wait for 6 mana, is not going to get him. Like, it's just, going to blow up everything. I'll blow up my Fairy Rogues, blow my Wolves, but Throne will still be there, etc. This deck does not run Throne, though, because I tend to think it's a pretty good matchup, and I tend to like higher impact cards. Now, you saw one of our high impact cards, if you saw a really quick mulligan decision in Boil, which in this game right here would have been terrible. We also run Choke. Those are really the two like big ones. Then Duress. There's like some smaller cards that are just more one for one, but they can get their strong answers. That's why you see like when you have hands like Duress, Thoughtseize, Inquisition against these style of decks, control decks, tend to be great because they only have so many answers. One, it gives you knowledge of what sequencing you should play out your threats in because you're going to trade threats with them. Like it's just going to happen. And if you watch one of these games on fast forward, it's hilarious to see how many cards go into and out of the graveyard and just the trading between the two decks because the two decks are going to trade vastly. But the thing is, at the end of the day, is there in this case, and Michelle, on control, or if I were playing control, you are going to end up trading more resources over time than your opponent will, who's playing a deck like this. What allows you to do that is you can draw into more resources. You have the ability to get more resources, but you expend a ton more. It's actually kind of an inefficient technique for winning the game. It's not one that I say I don't enjoy. I actually think playing control is one of my favorite archetypes to play. Generally combo control, but control is a very fun archetype for me. But that's where they tend to run into struggles. And I wanted to do this piece just to kind of show the control 4C matchup because I haven't seen Azorious or Esper Pie control in a hot minute in the 100 card singleton event. And it's kind of unfortunate because I think it's a very good deck. I think it's probably I think it's like I think the two best decks are the deck I'm playing right here, 4-Color Blood, and Pattern Rector. I think are the two best. But I think if we started unbanning some cards, I think Esper Pie could be a tier 1 deck as well. I think it's a 1.5 deck right now. I think it's very good. The reason I say that is because right now it has challenges fighting against red deck wins. Like it just does. I mean, it's just not an efficient deck. And if they land a turn 1 Goblin Guide or Jackal Pup, even, and they can just it can generate overwhelming impact or effects on the game. For instance, like they resolve a turn 1 Jackal Pup, and you got to find your repeal. So you ponder on your turn to find your repeal or whatever, to stop that thing from killing you. And then they resolve something else, like an Eidolon, whatever. And then just snowballs from there. That's why I think it's a tougher matchup. Now they definitely have tools like Chill is a card. That card is damn near impossible to beat if you're on red deck wins and you keep a good draw. If you keep like a 4-lander or something bad, like Chill doesn't make a difference. Well, it still kind of does because I mean, really at the end of the day, how that card beats them is just it forces them to only play 1 card a turn, as opposed to like 3 to 4, which is where the problem comes in for like a control deck like Michelle's. So I don't think it's quite one of the best decks. I do think it's a very powerful deck. I think it's better than red deck wins in a wide meta, but I think it's just bad against that deck. And I think you kind of saw here some techniques for how to beat it. There's certainly other ways, other strategies that they can get after control style variants. But you don't see them all that often anymore, and I kind of wanted to showcase her deck 'cause I think it's a very cool deck. And why not? We'll see if Moto will cooperate. We'll show the utter beating that we took from her in game 1. It frankly was kind of a doozer of a game because we just missed really hard on lands. But I don't want to be just showing games I win because I don't. So this was game 1 in the 3-set match that we ended up winning, but this is the one we lost. So we keep a 2-lander. They're both tapped. We didn't know what she was playing, so it seemed reasonable enough with the Bob in hand. A little slow, and like our chance of drawing a land in 2 draw steps weren't horrendous. So we finally hit our untapped land. We get countered here on Bob, which makes sense. Marsh Flats is the last land we draw this entire game. I believe we get down to about 80 cards in deck, and we don't hit another land. It's a pretty rough game. So she hangs us an Ancestral Visions down to 4 cards, find a Dramoka's Command, cast out a Kasali Pride Mage after finding Savannah. She considers countering this. Like, I think she's right not countering. It's a Kasali Pride Mage. I mean, what I think she has in hand is Humility, and she was worried. I think she wanted to counter because she thought, oh, Humility's going to get blown out by this card. Humility's going to get blown out by Dramoka's Command, and now I got a 4/4, which ends up working out pretty well for me. It's not bad. I have to go for it there because Sylvan Caryatid does absolutely nothing. under humility. So she looks like she's gonna go for something like a torrential gear hulk or something like that. She actually cast this thing out, so I just blow it up. Um, she doesn't have a hydroblast or anything, so she loses her land. I could have not done that and just traded Kasali for that thing, but I kind of wanted to keep the beats going here because I figure there's a good chance with her on 3 cards she has nothing. So I cast Vindicate and force her to counter it. She censors it. Fine, there I'm just like, all right, I want to limit you on mana because you're not going to be limited on resources after this Ancestral Visions comes off. Going for the attack here, force her to use Maze of Ith. I don't know why I attacked there. I guess I'm a dick. We cast out the Sylvan Caryatid. It gets countered, I think, almost instantly. Or, no, it doesn't get countered. She Wraths the next turn, if I recall this game correctly. Yeah, I think we eat a Wrath of God here, like a literal, actual Wrath of God. And that kind of spells our doom. No, Spring Verdict. My apologies. Okay, so we're at 84 cards now. 90 was our last land drop. We draw this thing. I cast it. I figure it's going to get countered. We could have put Tasigur in play, but Caracas is a thing in her deck, and I don't have a second play to make, so I just want to use my mana efficiently as I can here. I don't have a lot of it, so I figured if I draw a fetch land here or something like Tireless Tracker is a bomb, I can just start going into drawing. I don't. I choose to cast Tasigur here, and I figure it's going to get countered, and then I'm hoping to resolve an Avacyn's Pilgrim. As expected, she's got, I think it's Dismiss in hand or something like that. No, Mystic Confluence, even more of a beating. So we get our Tireless Tracker put back in hand. She draws a card, and our Tasker gets countered. We see a Jace come out. Jace tops us. We draw this thing. Can't get anything out of her hand. Play out the Tireless Tracker. It gets dismissed at this point. She's at 6 life of note, though. So, that Kasali Pride Mage went a long way. So on 3 lands, we did a significant amount. That's kind of the power of this deck. My thinking here was if I can draw a red source and land a Chandra, the reason I'm still playing this game is because Chandra could win it for me if she's just straight up out. So if she draws that thing, I have the Abrupt Decay already. I'm not going to play Anafenza into that because it'll just steal my Anafenza. Although perhaps I could have. Abrupt Decay is uncounterable. Maybe I should have actually gone. That's a very techie play, but perhaps I should have gone for Anafenza. She likely lets it resolve, steals it with Shackles, and then I can Abrupt Decay the Shackles. Looking back at it now, that may have been a better line for me to take. It's a little more techie. She has 6 cards now. She had multiple turns of Jace Pumps, or Jace Zeros, Brainstorms. So I figure I am doomed. This card pretty much spells it. I see my draw for the turn. I try casting this thing. She counters it, and I concede the game. Yep. So that was game 1. Actually, we're at 78 cards. So yeah, we went from 90 to 78 and never saw another land, which is that's rough variance right there. Michelle was stating that because the deck runs mana critters, sometimes it can get mana scream. It's a 35 land deck, but when you're 22 cards deep in the deck and you've drawn 3, that's running poor. You can't say 35 lands, you should be drawing better than that. And it happens. It's Magic. I'm not complaining about it. But sometimes that happens. This was bad variance though. It was just a bad draw. And they happen from time to time. So sometimes you gotta suck them down. I think up until a point though, I think our line was solid. I think, I guess the other line that we could have taken was the Anafenza line where she steals it with Shackles and we pull up the Shackles and swing in there real quick with the Pilgrim and this thing, knock her down to 4, and then hope to Mise. I guess actually that probably was the best line. Looking back at it now. Because the chances of the Anafenza resolving were probably pretty high with Shackles in play. She just untaps, gives me the thing back. Maybe she doesn't give me the thing back, though. But if we get hit for 2, that's a big game. And if we draw, we would need to draw a fetch. In retrospect, we wouldn't have drawn the fetch. But if we draw a fetch, find red mana, and can resolve a Chandra, which these are all big ifs, then we put her on a pretty quick clock. But I don't know. She's got an active Jace. She'll just bounce things, or she'll find a Wrath, whatever. She's got the Maze, too, so we're only hitting with one of the 2 creatures we get. And as it was, she found Elspeth Sun's Champion anyways, which, spelled our doom. I cast the Garrick here. I don't know what I was planning on doing with it, realistically. I guess putting a 2/2 into play and hoping for an Elspeth so that my thing could get turned around by Maze of Ith, my creature could. I don't know. There really wasn't an out here. I probably should have conceded as soon as Elspeth hit the board. This was a card, and this is a card that always concerns this deck. If you're playing against control, this card can realistically not be beaten by this deck. You need to have them tap out for it and have nothing backing it and just vindicate it or something, the turn it comes into play, and then you're still like chopping through like 1/1s forever. It's not good. Anyway, that was the series of matches. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and take care now.